Hello and welcome everybody to, that pops up every time if somebody's admitted. All right, hello everybody and welcome to the Center for the Interdisciplinary Study of Language and Literacy, OASIS Summaries workshop. Thanks so much for being here. All right, we're gonna go ahead and just jump into what is an OASIS summary. And I wanna start by saying that I have almost on every slide a link to the OASIS database website, and everything I'm sharing today, other than personal experience with these summaries, comes directly from that site. So you'll know that even if all of these resources are available in a very organized way for anyone who is interested. And then we'll be sure to share both the recording and the slides after today's workshop. Okay, so OASIS stands for Open Accessible Summaries in Language Studies. What they are is just a one-page summary or description of published research articles. Critically, they're written in non-technical language so that they are accessible to a wide audience. Each summary provides, in a very specific format, information about the study's goals, methods, and results. And there's also, if relevant, a section where summary writers are asked to highlight findings that may be of particular interest to language educators. I put a little asterisk there to say, even though that is an optional part of the summary, these summaries are not limited to research that has, like direct application. So theoretical work is also welcome in the OASIS database. Summaries are generally approved by and very often written or co-written by the authors of the original journal article. All right, so next, kind of the why. So why is this useful? OASIS aims to make research in language learning and teaching openly available and easily accessible to anyone who might be interested for professional or other reasons. And links here to a couple of studies that show that research findings don't usually reach stakeholders easily. So we have sort of this researcher to practitioner divide. There's also studies that show that academic publications are becoming more and more difficult to read and understand for people outside the field. And we also know, of course, access is a really big issue. So not only physical access, like it is hard to get for free access to published research, but also just sort of like theoretical access, right? So access to the ideas and knowledge that's being produced. So the goal of OASIS, why this sort of initiative was started, was that they want to really promote a systematic production and dissemination of open summaries, non-technical, in order to make research available to people outside of academia. And as far as whether or not that's been useful, so a huge question when OASIS was founded was whether or not educators, stakeholders broadly defined, would make use of this resource. And so they have this sort of running information about the total downloads. So as of last month, there were almost 50,000 downloads of these summaries, which is an incredible index of how successful the initiative has been. It really only began in 2018. So that's a pretty impressive number of downloads. So it seems like they're being used. Okay, so we've covered the what and the why. So next is the who. So who can write an OASIS summary? On the left-hand side of the screen, screenshotted directly from that help page on the OASIS database website, is a list of collaborating journals. So first and foremost, who can write summaries? Well, researchers. So after you publish a study, if you publish in a collaborating journal, you will be either required or invited with a strong recommendation that you provide an OASIS summary. Importantly, it doesn't have to be all of the authors or the primary author of the study who writes it. But for example, the last 3 papers that I published came with a, like a requirement request from the editor to say, please submit your summary by this date. Publications in other index journals that are relevant to language learning, language teaching, language use, multilingualism are also invited by OASIS to submit summaries for publication. You just may not get that invitation directly from the journal editor. But you can see the list of supporting journals and collaborating journals is growing every month. And many of these journals also will offer badges that will appear kind of at the top of your article to say that you have an open access summary, that you have open access materials, etc. Importantly, the who, as far as writing these summaries, is not limited just to researchers. So students are also encouraged to write and submit summaries for publication. There are a few extra steps if you're writing a summary that's not about your own work. So first, obviously, students need to make sure that there's not already a summary available on the website or in progress. So generally speaking, they say anything that's on the collaborating journals list that was published after 2018, check with those authors to make sure they're not in the process of writing that summary. But very helpfully, the OASIS database organizers have provided a template email for students to reach out to authors to say, hey, I would like to write a summary of your work. And they even have like a follow-up 1 and a follow-up 2 template. They're extremely supportive of making this an opportunity for students. Perhaps you might be interested in not necessarily writing original summaries, but translating existing summaries. So this is relatively new, but the team at OASIS has developed templates for multiple languages, so Arabic, Catalan, Chinese, Dutch, French, German, Hebrew, Spanish, and Turkish. So if there is an existing summary that you or your students want to translate, that's also part of the database. Of course, writing these summaries is a great opportunity for, graduate students, for example, to work on creating non-technical language versions and summaries of existing research. The OASIS organizers do ask that if you're going to have a requirement in your coursework or a suggested component of your coursework as writing these OASIS summaries, that you contact them. So their email address is available. And even when students are corresponding with authors, they ask that you CC the OASIS database so that they're kind of in the know and they might have information or can sometimes like nudge those authors. Okay, so that's the who. Now, which papers are eligible? So again, research articles about language studies. So language learning, teaching, use, multilingualism, pretty broadly defined. The work does need to be published in peer-reviewed journals listed in an indexed, a citation index. So Social Science Citation Index, Arts and Humanities, and the Science Citation Index expanded. And the link there is also, of course, on the OASIS database website, so you can just double check that the venue is eligible for an OASIS summary. All right, so hopefully with all of that, people feel encouraged to write a summary. So how do you get started? Well, once again, the OASIS team has provided not only templates and guidelines, but also a PowerPoint presentation that is annotated with an example summary. So I'm going to pause here for questions, and then if there aren't any, we'll go ahead and take a look at that annotated example so we can see what a summary looks like. Yeah.
Hello, this is Mariana Rickless. Can you hear me?
I can. Hi.
Yes, thank you. Hi. This is a very good presentation. Thank you. I have a question about the indexes or indexing websites. I assume Scopus is part of the social sciences approved website for citing. You have their social science citation index.
Yeah. So let me see. I can show perhaps. All right. So I'm going to put over on the screen. Yeah. So this is the OASIS database website, and you'll see a lot of the information that I've shared today comes directly from their About and their collaborating journals, but they have this really helpful Help tab. And let me see, information for journals that are collaborating, authors from other journals. So you can click on this hyperlink and search for the journal name to see if a specific journal is indexed. And if you have any questions, it's not an exaggeration to say, like, if you write to the OASIS database, they will respond with enthusiasm promptly. So if there's any question about, really, it's sort of like new emerging journals that won't necessarily be indexed yet, but it's a pretty broad swath of publication venues.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And then we have a question from our live audience, Laura.
So my question would be, a lot of my articles come with abstract. So can it be the same abstract, the summary for them?
Okay, so the question was whether or not like a study abstract could work as the summary, and the answer is no. So let me show you, and that probably bridges us nicely to our annotated examples. So you'll see kind of that the format is distinct, and that is specifically because the audience, when you write your study abstract, the audience is other researchers, other academics. When you write an OASIS summary, the audience is students, educators, somebody who's leading a bilingualism development group in their community. So it's a really, really different format. And yeah, I have some great examples to show if there aren't other questions and teams. Okay, great. So yeah, let's take a look. Okay, so how to write accessible summaries. All right, so this is what we've got through. All right, so first, accessible summaries have 4 components, and you can see like the blue that you see there, that is what the summary actually looks like. So it's not done, for highlighting purposes here. So the summary will have these 2 different colors happening, and that is really intentional based on a lot of research and kind of how to make these as useful as possible to a wide array of stakeholders. All right, so the 4 components are first, what the study was about and why it's important. And again, notice how that's worded. Next, what the researchers did. So we would normally say, okay, what were the methods and procedures? Here, the heading is what the researchers did. What the researchers found, and then things to consider. So you can see it's not exactly abstract-like. Of course, a lot of the same sort of big takeaway components, but written really specifically. All right. The summaries will also contain a header. It'll have an APA reference to the original paper because, of course, we want that link to be quite explicit. And then the summary will also have a title. It has its own title that is simpler than the title of the original article. And I will say this is probably where I struggle the most is retitling, my own papers. So here, for example, let me see if I can see here. The original title was Effect of Explicit and Implicit Instruction on Free Written Response Task Performance. That's the journal title. And then here, the summary title is The Usefulness of Giving Grammar Rules for Accuracy in a Free Writing Task. So like the usefulness, probably not going to use that in a journal, in an article title. Okay. All right, then just sort of on the template format, there's also going to be a footer that explains how to cite the summary. So these are citable publications, right? So this is something that your students, for example, can add to their CV or their, whatever their list of publications. I have a section on my CV for these summaries with hyperlinks so that people can access them quickly and easily. All right. Additionally, they are 1 page. Okay, so your whole summary has to fit on 1 page. The font sizes, the page layout, the margins are all prescribed in the summary template, which again, you might be shocked to hear you can download and access for multiple different languages from the OASIS database website. Okay, so that's kind of the overview. All right, so zooming in a little bit as far as the header and the title. So the header contains, again, the full reference to the summarized article, including the DOI. And then the titles are going to be different. So original titles are going to be simplified where necessary almost all the time. I've maybe never seen a title that was identical, the original published article and the summary title. Another thing to keep in mind for researchers particularly is if the title is different, you sort of distinguish your original publication from the summary as kind of its own standalone entity, which it truly is. These take time to write. All right. The next section is what this research was about and why it's important. So this section is going to be, again, brief, non-technical, and a full summary. So this is the most similar to your study abstract, but you'll see some kind of critical differences. So first, you're going to include a statement that explains why the knowledge obtained in the study might be important. And this can be hard. Not all of our research is meant to have direct applications, which is fine. And again, OASIS is open to a broad array of study types. Something that they encourage is that you really consider an audience outside of academia? Is it parents raising bilingual children? Is it teachers? Is it, other stakeholders? Or maybe a problem or real world concern that your study potentially addresses. So sort of this broad, why should we care about this paper? And these are useful for preparing elevator talks about your work to present to outside audiences, people from outside of your specific field of study. All right. This kind of what and why section is also going to clearly state the goal of the study or what motivated it. There's no need to include formal research questions, which again, we're not used to. So just sort of very general, non-technical. All right. In the summary, you can briefly explain the approach chosen. So like a little snapshot of the methods, what was done, and include a short statement about the study's main outcomes. So again, this kind of what and why, most parallel to a study abstract, but with some important changes. Again, this use of non-technical language, or if there's no way to avoid a technical term, you need to provide a definition. So an example here, in that first annotated example, this was the explicit and implicit instruction study. So instead of saying, first, one half of learners got explicit instruction, the writer said the rules were explained to one half of the learners and not the other half. So you can see how it just changes sort of the way that explanation comes across. Down below, there's an example of the terms comprehension and production. Really hard to state that completely differently. You're going to want to be able to use those terms. So they just added that parenthetical. Comprehension, how many words children understand. Production, how many words they can say. So you see those kind of clear definitions there. Okay, the next section is the what the researchers did section. So here, the methods. In this section, you're going to provide bullet points. So you have to really focus on what are my key elements and put them in a bullet point format. Okay. All right, so first, information to kind of contextualize the study, help readers relate and compare the study situation to their own context. Again, usually, at least in my work, I'm thinking, how can you relate my study to your study? And here it's more like, how can you relate the outcomes of this study to wherever you are existing in this sort of language study space? Okay. Any kind of technical details about the study design are going to be omitted here. So there's no mention of things like counterbalancing procedures, analysis procedures, etc. We don't care about that here. All right. Very useful information for the intended audience includes a clear description of the participants. Who were they? What was their language background? What were their ages? Native languages, additional languages, proficiency level, and then any additional information that's relevant, right? So in my work, I do neurolinguistics research. And so my participant section in a published paper has a lot of information about cognitive abilities, handedness index, all this stuff that a non-technical summary would just be very confused about. Why do we care that they were right-handed, right? So all of that would be omitted. Things like socioeconomic status, education level, etc., will only be included here if it's important to the questions of the study. Okay. Then, of course, sort of your tools and procedures, so the nature of any interventions, and then the procedures, so the tests used, the elicitation methods, or if you're writing an OASIS summary of like a synthesis or a review, again, non-technical information about how the sources were selected or coded. So you can see even like a meta-analysis, you could write an OASIS summary of a meta-analysis. It doesn't have to be a standalone original research article. All right, what else about this section? Where possible and relevant, the database organizers encourage the use of specific examples. Tables and figures can be used, but remember, you only have one page, so it's really tricky to fit that in. But often, a couple of example stimuli, maybe an image if it's relevant to the particular measure or intervention used in the study. Where necessary, of course, glosses. So if your stimuli are in a language that is not the same as the summary language, you're going to have to gloss that. That's not really different than most journal articles. And then if a lot of times when you're looking at these summaries, you'll see these hyperlinks. So if your materials are available in an open access framework like the Open Science Framework or the IRIS database, it has to be a permanent repository. You can't include a link to a personal website or even a university website because, as we know, those change a lot. You can include those hyperlinks there so that readers can see the materials or the data sets. All right, again, we're going to avoid any kind of technical terms, things like trials, conditions, treatment, pretest, post-test. This is hard to do. So in my experience, I always have somebody in a completely different field go through and read it and tell me, nope, this doesn't make sense. I don't know what this means. Another kind of good tactic is to have a family member outside of academia read this, because that is sort of that's your audience here. So here's just, again, a couple of annotated examples. So terms like grammaticality judgment task or the official name of a standardized test, if you're using the DELE or the TOEFL, you're going to omit that. All right. Now, next section. So that's what the researchers did. Next section, what the researchers found. Okay, so here we always have, here's the main results and here's the other results, and I want to discuss them. We're going to pare all of that down and describe the main findings. So like, what's the key takeaway? Again, the findings are presented in a logically ordered and bulleted list. So not a ton of prose here. Detailed results aren't going to be included, but sort of the outcomes in a comprehensible way. So in that way, much more like how you would present your results in the abstract of the paper, just sort of here's the general takeaway. Things like significant differences, not going to be included. So instead of saying something like, there was a significant interaction between this group and this intervention type, right? You're going to have to reword that in a non-technical way, sort of avoiding stats terms altogether. And then a number of different examples. So here, for example, the original statement was something like, at 13 and 20 months, there was no significant difference between the two groups on the comprehension and the production scores. Sounds totally fine to me. For the OASIS summary, they rewrote that as, both at 13 and later at 20 months, bilingual children understood and produced as many Dutch words as the monolinguals. So much less technical. All right, then the last section is the things to consider section. So the point of this section, the goal here is to help readers interpret the meaning of the findings. How can they, take this and apply it to their lives, or what does this mean for them? Critical things here, avoid sweeping statements, make sure to use past tense and careful wording. The idea being that we want to avoid unwarranted generalization of the findings. We want the audience to know, okay, this is what this study found in this group, etc. Yes, use determiners like these, the, our, to emphasize that any statements you're making and the things to consider apply to the specific study, not all people or all languages. All right. A goal here in this section is to try to help the readers think about how the study might relate to their context and give some food for thought. So here an example is in the top where we were looking at the explicit and implicit training conditions. This seems a safe pedagogical option, but it may be difficult to give learners sufficient exposure to the grammar for them to pick up patterns, right? So a language educator can kind of take that and say, okay, I can apply that to, or I can consider that in my own classrooms. And monolingual children and sort of their overall lexicon. They stated, in a bilingual situation, a child's vocabulary development is late. If in a bilingual situation, a child's vocabulary development is late, it is important to consider explanations other than being bilingual. For instance, a child may have a hearing problem. This is an OASIS summary that I would like to sort of just distribute around to pediatricians' offices in areas with a lot of bilingual children, because very, very common. The first thing that a pediatrician will say if there's any sort of language delay and the child is being raised bilingually is drop that second language. And research has shown again and again that that's not a problem, that it doesn't cause a delay. And so this type of summary can be really helpful in sort of dispelling what could be really harmful myths and misunderstandings. All right, you can also discuss in this section unexpected results and suggest avenues for future research and point to potential limitations. An important caveat here is that we don't want to list just limitations, which leaves the reader kind of thinking, well, okay, then what do I take away from this? But rather suggest future research and ways to build upon the existing research as sort of a more positive way to contextualize the study results. Okay. All right, and then last, and again, just sort of a prescribed format is the footer. The footer is going to provide the reference to the summary rather than the original article, because remember, this is something that can be cited. And you can see that a reference to the original article is cited within this summary. So instead of the entire title, you're going to have, excuse me, author, last names, year, and then the journal that it was presented in. Again, if the materials are available in an open access permanent repository, a link is going to be included there. And again, pretty specific in terms of what you can and cannot link within the summary. Okay. The authors for the summary, as we sort of talked about in the who at the beginning, are the people who helped write the summary. So very often it will be the original article authors, but maybe in a different order. Depending on your research team, it might be the case that one person really likes writing these summaries. That's the situation with me, and others are like, please, no, I don't want to write those. So again, just like you would for authorship for a publication, you're going to list the authors in order of contribution. And if it's equal, you can put them in alphabetical order. Okay. The year that the summary was written is going to be included. Again, this is citable. So you can see, for example, that the top study, the original paper was published in 2011 before OASIS database existed. And then the summary was published in 2018, one of the very first example summaries. And it was written by the founders of the OASIS database as an example. And then same thing for the study below. The study was published in Applied Psycholinguistics in 2014, but the date of the summary publication is 2018. Okay. Again, your summary title is going to appear here, not the article title, and always a reference to that original article. Okay. So that is our overall summary, our summary of summaries. And again, I just want to refer everybody to the OASIS database website for all of this information and more. And from there, we're going to go to our little closing slide here and open for questions. And if anyone has an article they want to get started on, I will put a link in the chat to the summary template. Thank you. Oh, I see the transcript here. Very thorough transcript. Hey, so
yeah, this is King Chung from Northern Illinois. I'm not sure if this is the whole group of Northern Illinois group, because I don't recognize anyone except Allison. I think this is a great tool for students to actually make the research very translational. Yeah, sort of like a translation between the research and the regular layman. So it is really great. And then I already thought of I can use this as one of the learning tools for the students so that they can write these things. And then they do these things count as a publication for them, or what category does it count? And then also, can you please post a link to the chat anyway? Thank you.
Yeah, so I just added in the chat. Thank you for the question and the comment. I'm glad that you can see sort of a practical application for these summaries in your teaching. So in the chat, you'll see a link to the English summary. So you should be able to click on that, download it, and edit. And then again, if you're looking for a different language, you can go to the OASIS database website and download those templates. As far as kind of where it counts, I don't know that there's a prescribed CV section. They are not, peer reviewed in the sense that you're going to get reviewer feedback and make revisions, etc. But they are, it is a citable publication. So like I had mentioned on my CV, I have a section that is titled Open Access. Oh, sorry. Open access summaries, so that's something you could certainly do. Let me see.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, it would be great for the students to, have something that they wrote and they publish, and, that can go into their CV. And then, for the researchers, definitely, if we published the paper, then this is just something for us to promote our findings, or advance the field, the understanding of the field, what we find out, and our research results. Okay, yeah, thank you. Really appreciate this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think your research is particularly, very much has real world applications, so would be a great kind of contender for these type of summaries. Yeah. Allison had a question, and then I see Lindsay's hand. Allison? I have not done them as a class assignment personally. I think it really would be more appropriate in a graduate level course than an undergraduate level course, although anybody could work on them. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry about that. I only teach graduate courses, so that's fine.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
then also this is great that because we're changing to a third-year program, so we are cutting the capstone projects out from their curriculum, and then this will be a great thing for them to still learn how to consume research, and then how to really translate between the sciencey stuff to the layman terms. So it is great. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Lindsay, did you have a comment or a question?
Two comments. One is, I think there are actually a couple of people here today from one of my graduate classes. I gave this as an option for an assignment this semester. So hopefully they're inspired to go write summaries after the workshop. And in terms of where to put this on your CV, I have a section on my CV called Public Communication of Science. I don't know if how would that be an appropriate place for this, or is this what?
Yeah, absolutely, because they are openly accessible. So absolutely anybody in the world can download these summaries and have access to them. So I would say, yeah, public communication for sure. Yeah, that seems like a great.
So for graduate students who might not have a lot of publications, they might not want to signal that this is not like a traditional publication. So maybe just.
Yeah, I would say for, just for being forthright, I think it's important to distinguish that it's like a non-refereed publication. But yeah. And if a graduate student does write a summary, it will have to be approved in most cases by the original, the authors of the original study. So in that way, I guess it's a little bit refereed. It's just not that traditional peer review process. Yeah. Other questions?
I wonder, sorry, so I'm just thinking, so I wonder how strict the limits are for like traditional language and linguistics. Like, would literacy fall under the category that's appropriate here?
So yeah, language use, language acquisition, language development for sure. I would say, sorry, I'm just trying to add this into the chat too. And I think it should be anyone from NIU should be able to open that. And if not, you can email me. But again, if you have questions and you're not quite sure if it fits, if you write to that OASIS database email, they'll say yes, no. In my experience, they're very, but my research fits like exactly with what they want, kind of the original view of it. But yeah, my experience is that the initiative is really to create this huge repository of accessible summaries of a broad range of any kind of language related research. So literacy development, in my view, fits right in there. Other questions? Are you ready to start your own summaries? Well, I've added in the chat the PowerPoints. and also a link to the template, which I think everybody, at least if you're from NIU, you should have access. And if not, I have my email there, so you can email to if you do need access to something, and I can send that to you. Otherwise, oh yes, is it in the chat? Yes. Okay, and then Allison has put the attendance link in the chat, so if everybody can please open that and fill it out for CISL's record keeping and attendance reporting. It also is important if you are a CISL affiliate or a student affiliate and you want to be eligible for things like POP grants, that you sign in every time you attend an event, because there are certain requirements for participation in CISL events in order to be eligible for that funding. Yes, and upcoming awards. That's right. We have some cool upcoming awards. All right. Is there something else you want me to remind people about? Next writing workshop or anything? Yeah, hop on the Teams link yeah.
Our next writing workshop is Tuesday from 12 to 1. And we're just going to be writing together silently. So if you want a group of friends to be virtually with you while you write, join us on Tuesday.
Yeah, exactly. You could write your first OASIS summary. All right, I am going to go ahead and stop the recording, but I'll stay on if anyone has additional questions. Yeah.